One is just, we have an idea of what we believe the property should be performing at. And when they're not performing at that, we're asking the questions. I think one, sometimes people don't have the expectations. And then two, and this is really anything in life, like ask a million, bajillion, whatever number you want to throw out their questions, and just keep digging, keep pulling that yarn until you kind of get to the answer. If you don't ask the question, whether it's, a pay raise, the answer is always no. If you don't ask the question when it comes to why is my revenue not doing well, it's not going to get better. So it's really just asking that question.
Welcome to RevLabs by PriceLabs.
Hey everybody, Kyle here with RevLabs, and I'm super excited today for our Life of a Property Manager podcast series. Today, I'm joined by Nate Klatt with HomeHop Property Management. Nate, thank you for joining us today. If you take a second, or if you don't mind to take a second, introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing with HomeHop right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, Kyle. So a little background on myself. I am originally from the Midwest, born and raised in Akron, Ohio. Went to school at Michigan State, where I was on a football scholarship and got my CPA license. Worked in public accounting, different accounting realms, and then ultimately fell into the short-term rental space about 4 years ago. With that, we have a company called HomeHop Property Management. We list a little over 100 listings, of which I own 10 personally, and then another 30 through two different funds we raised, being a $2 million and a $5 million fund. And just excited for the journey we're on and where it's taken us.
That's awesome. And my journey with you, Nate, came in, I guess it's been about a year and a half ago. I was kind of your account manager with PriceLabs. Got to know you and Dan a little bit, and now you're working with my teammate, Layla. So as you've been growing, and I think when I first met you, you had around 40 total properties. Is that right? Like 40 to 50 when I first started chatting with you?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think our first year we were around 10 to 15 and then grown, call it 30, 40, then about another 60 this last year.
Yeah. So for our folks that are listening right now that are kind of in that 20 to 30 to 40, 50 range, what's it been like for you going and growing so quickly? Because it seems like it's just kind of, you've doubled overnight, basically, is what it feels like to me. So what's it been like for you?
Yeah, I think the part that's been really interesting is, one other experience I did have was with a startup in San Francisco, and I really got to learn from the founders, the executives, how do you scale a business? And we really tried to apply that to HomeHop. So when I first met with you, I think we might have had one or two VAs, myself and Dan. So we were a team of 3 to 4 people. Now we have closing in on 17 full-time team members, approximately half are remote and half are stateside. But it really has gone from a business that I feel like I'm driving everything to now I'm able to really be focused more on some of the vision aspect of where we want to go and then putting the right team members in place. But it really turned into, it's kind of a holy cow, we have a real business now versus it's I'm an Airbnb host.
Yeah, and you're really doing your thing too, and like remote work. I work for a company that's fully remote. You can get so much out of remote workers, and you're kind of living that example. You live in San Diego. HomeHop's properties, correct me if I'm wrong, right outside of Cleveland, getting into Akron. Maybe eventually we start getting into Columbus as well. Who knows? But yeah, talk about what it's like living on the West Coast, but coming over here and pricing in the heartland, so to speak.
Yeah, so it definitely helps that I am from Ohio originally, so I definitely have my roots based there. But our team right now is definitely scattered. And speaking to that, we I'd say about 7% of our properties are Cleveland, 20% Akron, and the rest are kind of scattered. But we have 2 properties that we just bought for our fund in Columbus. We did take on our first live client in Columbus. We actually helped them to find the property, to design the property, and then get it live. And then we have a property in Dayton as well. So it's and Cincinnati. So we're really seeing all of Ohio right now. And it was actually before I jumped on this call, I literally had a call set up with me and 2 other partners called our 2026 expansion plans for the Midwest. And it was, you don't want to be everywhere. You start to lose quality, but like, how do we want to think about concentration while still trying to grow as fast as possible and adding new markets? So it was literally having those strategic conversations right now. What makes sense? How fast do we want to grow? What markets do we want to be in? And again, it's just one of the fun parts about the business is how do I start to not necessarily work in the business, but also work on the business?
Yeah. So I don't need your secret sauce, and don't tell us what your plans are for sure on the markets you're going into. What kind of are your growth plans like over the next year or over the next 2-3 years? What are your expectations, and what are some of your goals?
Yeah, so going into next year, our goal is to be somewhere around that mid to upper 100s property count. We are starting to find different ways to generate leads. Right now, one of the big things that we're leaning into is as simple as calling Zillow Rentals. Seeing who's not a property manager. If they're a property manager, they're not going to give up any names. But having worked in like SaaS sales where you call somebody and you might get a 5% pickup rate, now you're getting a 50, 60, 70% pickup rate. So we're even looking at right now probably hiring our first account executive to work underneath our chief growth officer on how do we bring in more clients. But the underlying base is always you need to have top operations, you need to have the top software, the top processes, and that's something we're really proud of. Right now we average around a 4.88 on I think 7,000 reviews now, so we have an upper score rating, and part of that is going to be the great operations, and then part of that is really leaning into making sure we are setting up the props up for success with the proper design, the proper amenities, and really trying to make those expectations of guests meet the reality when they get to the property.
Yeah. So before we get into some of those processes and some of the thoughts that you're doing, what kind of got you into doing short-term rental property management? You said that you have a history with tech. Was it just you had, inkling, let's make a little extra money, let's grab a couple of Airbnbs, and it's all of a sudden we've grown to this large property manager? Or did you kind of have something else that drew you to it? Or 'cause I know you mentioned CPA. Do you have anything in real estate that interested you, anything like that?
Yeah, so I grew up on the job site. My dad was a general contractor as a kid, so I was always had real estate on the background. Always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Actually, about 2 months before COVID hit, I was very close to signing up to be a franchise owner for a gym in San Diego. Again, I always knew I wanted to work for myself. I didn't want to be a W-2 long-term. I wanted to learn from that, but long-term, I wanted to be my own boss. My original partner and I, we did our first flip, right? It actually got acquired, I think, like the end of April 2020. So it was like right as COVID hit, we got our first property under contract. It was very nerve-wracking. I will say the remote work allowed me to be able to do both my full-time W-2 as well as that side hustle. A lot of 70, 80-hour weeks put in, but it allowed me to do about 15 flips in 2020 and 2021. Fell into short-term rentals. We had a property my partner had that they couldn't sell at the right price point. I was like, this was like a good one to buy, and let's just test it. We bought it, put it on Airbnb. We're like, wow, we can make some real money here. And then that's really our origins to where we are now.
That's awesome. And, the people that don't know the origins of PriceLabs, it kind of started with our co-founders. They had an Airbnb, wanted to know how to price it. Like, everybody's got to start somewhere, and everybody starts with that first one. It's always fun to see people like you grow and build it out. You mentioned a little while ago, like making sure that you've got the processes, you've got the tech stack available for you, and that it's really clicking. Obviously, you're on here, you use PriceLabs, but what else are you using inside of that tech stack, and what resources have you found have been really, really useful for you?
Yeah, and I will say, just a shout out to PriceLabs. Whenever anyone asks me, especially if there's someone that wants to be their own operator, they're not looking for a property manager, the first thing I always say is get a dynamic pricing tool. We personally use PriceLabs. It's the easiest ROI to point to, so it's kind of a no-brainer. In terms of the rest of our software, there's a few different ones that we really like. One of the ones that comes to mind right now is, again, we're always leaning into AI, and we have a software called Conduit. It was formerly known as Host AI. And what they really do is they are a guest messaging platform for leveraging AI. So about 75 to 80% of our questions get answered via the AI versus our VA guest message team having to make that. So it significantly reduces the amount of time they need to spend. And then it also really organizes everything. Now you have a very clear channel. And again, we're on we're on Host Away. We're admittedly making a switch right now to another provider. But this really let us organize everything so that we were able to have a very clear, when the VAs log in, they know their tasks. It's all in Conduit, along with using, Asana and some of the other task management platforms. But that's been a very cool tool that we really loved.
That's awesome. And I love what's happening right now with the generative and the descriptive AI stuff. It's great to hear people using those tools. Anybody that isn't aware of it, again, Nate mentioned them, Host AI. Take a second, take a look at them. But yeah, anything else that you can think of that has helped you in the learning process? Like right now, you've kind of got everything figured out. Was there anybody in the past, anybody in the markets, or anybody that you relied on kind of to get some assistance with building this out?
Yeah. So when I first was getting into this, I probably listened to 1,500 hours, I would argue, maybe 1,000 hours, somewhere in that range of just different podcasts on short-term rentals. One of my favorite things about this space is you don't need to be a rocket scientist to do well in this space. You need to be able to have a little bit of work ethic and then be organized.
Yep.
So the podcast space was largely valuable. Get Paid for Your Pad was actually the one that I probably listened to the most, admittedly, when I was going through it. I got to know Jasper quite well, was in his mastermind, learned a lot. And then since then, the networking aspect of short-term rentals, we were at the VRMAs in Vegas here about a month ago. There's a few other operators that are in their 30s that are kind of like very tech forward. And we actually just started our own mastermind where there's about 15 of us. We're going to meet monthly. We're in a Slack channel where we're constantly bouncing ideas off each other. And they're all at a very similar space. They're in that 100 to 200 range listing count. Very motivated, but in general, there's just so many people that are going to be in a very same spot to you, no matter what spot you're in. And this industry is one where you can ask questions and people are happy to give you answers. Absolutely.
That to me is so key. And I don't know much about the mastermind group, but I got a feeling that you're probably linked up with Blue Gems, if I had to guess on that situation. Well, shout out to my boys Aiden and JB. We love you guys. Always appreciate you. Wish I was still working with you as intimately as I used to be. Same with you, Nate. I called you Nat there for a second. I enjoyed having those conversations with you and looking at your revenue. And you have a really good revenue mind too, and that's something that not all property managers will want to put the time in behind it and all of that. But what do you think makes you successful with your revenue strategy? Like, you all perform really, really well versus the market. You get good ADRs, good occupancy. What do you think kind of separates you from everybody else?
I think there's a couple of different things. One is just we have an idea of what we believe the property should be performing at. And when they're not performing at that, we're asking the questions. I think one, sometimes people don't have the expectations. And then two, and this is really anything in life, like ask a million, bajillion, whatever number you want to throw out there questions, and just keep digging, keep pulling that yarn until you kind of get to the answer. If you don't ask the question, whether it's, a pay raise, the answer is always no. If you don't ask the question when it comes to why is my revenue not doing well, it's not going to get better. So it's really just asking that question. And even on that, going back to that scalability, for us, we hit a point where, we had about 75 listings under management, and no longer did it make sense for my partner and I to be directly the ones performing the revenue. And we actually outsourced our revenue to a company called OTA Miser. And they are the ones now that do our revenue management. I meet with them several times a month to make sure that I have an understanding of what's going on. I'm still kind of digging through some of the details, but I really bought back my time freedom to then focus on other areas of the business while still having a top-notch revenue manager in place. So there is that tipping point when it makes sense to bring somebody in that's going to be able to spend just more time on it and has more of a specialty focus on it.
Oh, that's awesome. And who he's referring to, OTA Miser. I don't know if you know their website right off the top of your head. Feel free to give them a shout out. We want people to get as much help as they can from these as well. So
yeah, it's OTA Miser and AutoRank. I don't know the exact website off the top of my head, but if you search those two, it should pop right up. But those guys have been fantastic to work with. And again, they then had their own process put in that was head and shoulders above what we were doing when we were just doing it as solopreneurs.
Yeah, and they're very sharp guys. Baryons, love them to death. They're all very, very sharp guys. So definitely give them a shot if you have any interest in getting some outsourced RM help as well. Now let's think about, as you've been growing, has there been how many hiccups have you hit? Have you had anything that's just like, man, I feel like I got to stop doing this property management thing? Have you had anything come to you like that? Or has it just been nose to the grindstone? We're going to make it work.
I think the part that's been most interesting is we have 40 something homes owned. We're managing another 100. And in your head, you're like, oh, that person's got to be just making buku bucks or doing. And it is a little bit of a reality check when you're like, okay, we are doing well. But our goal is I don't for us specifically, we're building a team where I want to be 300, 400, 500 units, and I want to have the right people in place. Whereas if your goal is to have 100 units, I could probably have half the staff and still be comfortable. I don't need an onboarding specialist. I don't need the amount of guest messaging VAs. I don't need just the team we built out. So that's the part where it's like, you keep kind of waiting for this like aha moment of like, okay, we made it, we're here. And it's always kind of looking back and being like, man, 2 years ago, we weren't a business, or 3 years ago, we weren't a business. In my head, it's like, I have to hit this number in my head. So it's really just like enjoying the ride, enjoying the process, and just kind of reminding yourself, like, you can do, I think the quote is something along the lines of, in a year, you do way less than you think, but in 5 years, you'll do way more than you think. And just kind of trying to reflect on that. Because it is a grind, it is a journey. But the last piece I'll say to that is, I do know a lot of hosts where they don't hire the right people, they don't put the right process in place, and they're what's called hectic hosts, and they're the ones messaging guests at 7 o'clock on a Friday night or 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. Like, we have very clear distinguishments and teams dedicated to different areas. And I want to make sure I have a 7-month at home, I have a wife. If I'm sitting here on Airbnb app messaging guests at 10 o'clock, my relationship's going to suffer. So making sure that I also have the right work-life balance I'm going through this, or else you will get burned out.
Those are such great tips. And as I was listening to you, Nate, I just kept hearing the football speak. And I mean that as a full compliment. Like, Nate, if you have anything that you want to do in the future outside of property management, go for it. Because you got motivational speaker written all over you, man. I was bought in. I was enjoying that. But anyways, kind of back to this stuff. Any other advice that you can think of off the top of your head, like specifically for somebody that may be in that boat where they're questioning whether or not they want to keep growing, or do they want to get out of this? Maybe they're sitting at 50 listings or so right now and trying to decide where to go next. Any advice that you've got off the top of your head?
There's a concept of always like planning with the future, or like the ending in mind. And what I'll say is, I really think sitting down and understanding what kind of company do you want to be and where do you want to go, and having those conversations. Personally, my first partner is also my best friend. So there's a lot of real conversations there where I have to be very, we have to be very direct with each other. And we can't be shy to say what we want or what we're thinking or where we want this business to go. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with having a 50 unit property management business. Maybe that's all you do. You kind of then build the business to that. Maybe your goal is to be 1,000 unit business, and okay, you need to build the business much differently, but just really having like clear expectation of what truly is your goal over the next, 1, 3 to 5 years. And then from there, you can work backwards into it. But if you're just kind of running around, like maybe I'll add units, maybe I won't, I don't really have a strategy, I don't really have a focus, then it's hard to really know like what are my expectations. And again, kind of similar to if you set the right expectations for guests and then the state meets the reality, it's the same for your business. If you have expectations and then you kind of have a goal to work towards, you're going to be happy. If you don't have expectations, then you really don't have a goal to work for. And now all of a sudden you're kind of feel like you're chasing your tail and you really don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And there's no way to ever really feel satisfied.
Yeah, that's spectacular, Nate. I do want to thank you again for your time today. We kind of had some delays on getting this recorded. Appreciate you being patient with me and working with my schedule. Nate, hope to have you back on this soon. And I hope to hear you on some of these other podcasts as well. You've got a great mind for this stuff, and we need to get you out there and get you a little bit more vocal in the industry, I think.
Awesome.
But yeah, Nate, thank you so much for joining us again. For Nate Klatt with HomeHop PM. If you're ever up in the Ohio area, Cleveland, we're getting into Columbus, as you stated, Hocking Hills area, go check them out. Try to book a stay with them if you're in that area. Book direct, homehoppm.com if you don't mind. But thank you all for joining us. I'm Kyle with PriceLabs, and this has been RevLabs. Thank you very much.